Have you heard a cue there, Nina? Are we good to go?
Yeah, we're good to go.
Nice. Well, thanks to everybody who's joining this afternoon. Good to have people here, and looking forward to having this session discussing all things tech and AI adoption, particularly in the context of the German region. So as you go into the session, I want to just briefly introduce myself, and I'll also hand over to Nina as well to introduce herself, and I'm very pleased that she is joining me today. So as you can see, I am a practice advisor here at Linklaters. My role is to help advise customers across the globe, essentially, in terms of how they can adopt and use technology within their practice groups. So I was a former lawyer. I was a real estate lawyer at a full service firm in London for about 6 years, and I've been at Kira and now Linklaters for around 3. So very pleased to be here today.
All right, then also, yeah, thank you. A warm welcome from my side. I'm really happy to be here today. I'm Nina. I'm working for Linklaters also now for more or less 3 years. I hold a bachelor's and a master's degree in law and economics, and I did as well a legal technology and legal operations program at the Bucerius Law School in Hamburg this year. And I started as well as a lawyer in the real estate department here in Germany, and I quickly discovered my passion for legal tech. And I'm really happy that Linklaters gave me the chance to switch my roles. And yeah, today I am responsible for legal tech solutions and the adoption and especially of AI solutions in our European offices, and give various presentations about tech, legal operations, and work on the matters. And yeah, that's what we want to have today here. And I would like to present you some skills from the experience I gained here at Linklaters.
Perfect. So let's look at what we're going to cover today then. So first of all, we want to have a look at the legal tech landscape within Germany broadly, really, just taking a step back to look maybe at attitudes to tech and how that might have changed, looking at attitudes in particular as well to client service delivery and how that relates to tech. Then we want to have a look at certain themes that underpin successful adoption and discuss the extent to which these resonate within Germany and your experience, Nina, before finishing with some final thoughts and some Q&A as well if there are any questions. As we go through the session as well, please use the chat or the question boxes that you can see on the screen there. Just put anything in there that you need to ask or have comments on. So I think one of the absolute truths when it comes to AI adoption, not just in Germany but globally, is that obviously it takes time. That's not to say that you can't achieve quick wins and good success stories, but I guess to fully embed a tech tool into a work process, it requires behavioral change, and that can take time, and it can be sometimes hard to achieve. I think an important point to note, though, is that there's never a perfect time to start that adoption journey. If it's a boom time, there's maybe a sense that you need to get people working more efficiently. If it's a downturn, there's a sense that you've got the opportunity to have some breathing room to get people upskilled. So whichever way I think you slice it, there are benefits to both, but really just start now and keep going and be make sure you try and have the impetus to try and keep adopting and using the skills that you can to get people into those platforms. So Nina, I wonder, how would you assess the journey that Linklaters has been on in the last few years? Where were you as a firm and where are you today?
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Yeah, this journey is, I think, also quite interesting and might be similar to one of our listeners today, because Linklaters is one of the pioneers when it comes general to legal operations in Germany, and is one of the first law firms Linklaters signed a contract with the firm Business Integrity. It's today known as Thomson Reuters, about the predecessors of the software Contracts Express. So, however, we then implemented VDR solutions and created as well our own e-discovery team back in 2014. And since 2016, we now started to deal with AI solutions. And as well as one of the first Magic Circle law firms, we tested several AI providers, and obviously we decided for Kira. So today we trained Kira by ourselves and implemented it for a variety of M&A transactions. To get there, it took us, as already mentioned, a lot of effort, because change management is never done overnight. But at the same time, we also noticed that not only our new joiners' mindset changed and they wanted to work more efficiently, as well as our clients did. So our clients now expecting a more precise, a quicker, and at the same time, a cheaper full DD. So this request can only be handled with the help of AI and tech. And to be completely honest today, we're still not on the top of the mountain, but what we can do with AI, but we are already on a good way and we're progressing. And these changes, at least, are not lasting only because of the pandemic, because the pandemic gave the whole technology aspect a big drive in the correct direction in the last 2 years. And however, let me say one last thing. This process takes a lot of time, as mentioned, a personal effort, and readiness for try and error processes. So that's all the basis for successful adoption.
No, I think that's a great summary. And as you say, you're not at the top of the mountain at this stage. I think very few firms would say that they are. It's just about that journey and trying to think long term about making incremental progress, isn't it? I think in terms of that step back and looking at the landscape within Germany, we conducted a survey at Litera recently of professionals across the legal industry. And this is kind of on a global scale, in particular looking here at the European market. So looking at both lawyers and allied professionals, we've got a couple of visuals here to just put some context around where, I guess, Germany sits in relation to the rest of Europe on some key questions. So this first item here looks at the extent to which tech is considered to be helpful in giving a better client experience. I think you'd expect there to be very positive feelings about that generally, and as you can see, that's broadly the theme here. And no surprise that Germany kind of sitting fairly high up that leaderboard, I suppose, in terms of that sentiment. But if we look at this second slide here, we're looking now at whether firms are seen to prioritise that client experience. So I think again, all different regions are kind of prioritising that experience or giving a sense of that experience is prioritised. Germany's maybe the least convinced about that at just 70% there. So I guess it's maybe an interesting question in terms of tech adoption, because one of the main motivations for firms buying tech is that ability to differentiate yourself through better client service. So I wonder, Nina, is this an indication or a small indication maybe that tech should be prioritized more as a way to close that gap, or could it be better used than it is currently?
Absolutely. So of course, we also prioritize the client experience. But I think maybe in Germany, we often have this aspect that the clients only see the result. So in the first instance, we might not need to have a nice client dashboard or transparency. But nowadays, the clients want to have more transparency and they expect us to provide transparency. So this means that there's room for improvement to become more progressive when it comes to use a new technology. And our industry is rather a slow adopter than a quick one. But as I already mentioned in my first speech here, the pandemic forced clients and as well the law firms to improve their way of working, and also this increased the demand for using tech. And this push is now seen in different requests from the clients because they assume it as a matter of course the tech solution and as well the AI solution is included in every DD process. So yeah, I really hope that the next survey will show a higher percentage in this regard then.
No, I think that's fair to say, and I think it's interesting that maybe despite the sentiment generally saying that tech is helpful in delivering a better quality service and that this should be prioritised, we know, and think from your experience, that adoption journey can still be a bit of a struggle. And maybe this next slide suggests one of the reasons why that might be, which is telling us here that lawyers can feel threatened by allied professionals. And so by allied professionals, we're thinking about people who are in those additional parts of the business, the law firm business, that work alongside the lawyers to try and help smoothen and improve that client experience. So obviously people in industries like yours, in the innovation space as well. I wonder if this is reflective of your experience on the ground in terms of that kind of almost 50% of people thinking there's a worry that their work might be taken away from them.
Yeah, I think this is super interesting, but as you said, not surprising. But in my opinion, this threat is emphasized due to different circumstances in Germany. I think one is the long-lasting studies over here. So studying law in Germany is one of the hardest and maybe longest studies we have. So every lawyer, once finished, will then show how resistant he is, what he learned, that he doesn't need support or help. Just imagine the bar exams also done without any help. So I think that's one of the reasons. The second one is the billable hour model. As known, the hours billed are the parameters for any success of a lawyer. And the third one is not working this crazy hours might scratching the public image of an M&A lawyer. And the combination, I mean, there's more than just this points, but a combination of these points just shows that the threat is real, but help of professionals is not meaning to lose any reputation. Instead, I think it shows willingness to provide a better client service. And so all in all, yes, lawyers are conscious of failing to hit targets, which can be handled better by professionals. And just by the way, it's not only lawyers. We also have, for example, economists with a law background, but yeah, there are also a lot of lawyers in our industry. So this is never easy and does not relate only to the law industry, but all in all, I think we should work as a team and show willingness to provide a better service for our clients.
No, yeah, I mean, I think that's completely fair, and also, you know, it's not always, you know, on the lawyer to get that confidence in themselves. You know, I think there's got to be work done from the vendor side and from the support side as well, in terms of giving them that confidence to use the tools at their disposal. Maybe the tools aren't working the way they should, and we need to do better on the vendor side. But if they are, it's also around that adoption process. Obviously, that's what we're going to look at as well in the main in this session today, and how you can kind of consider that adoption process as much as possible and as effectively as possible. Before we get into that conversation, though, I just wanted to have a quick look at you know, what a potential scenario could be for firms that are, you know, further along their adoption journey, giving a sense of what is possible to achieve essentially using AI tools. On screen, we've got the essential components really of an M&A process. So from kickoff to the review, from negotiating and then closing and post-closing. And you can see how, you know, it's possible for AI tools to touch every part of that process, and sometimes have multiple tools involved in those processes as well. And so for those firms that are fairly far along their adoption journey, they are managing to incorporate all these different tools in their process. But as we touched on, you know, that's not where most firms are. I think this is almost, in some cases, utopian and what firms are hopefully trying to get to, but it's not where most firms are at the moment. I think particularly in Germany as well. So I think we want to turn really to look at that adoption journey in more detail. And what we're going to try and do, I think, is really look through it through the lens of the review stage, and in particular, I suppose, looking at Kira. I wonder, Nina, as someone on the vendor side, I'm talking about Kira a lot of the time, every day. I wonder how you explain Kira to lawyers internally.
I'm happy to do so. So normally we make it quite easy and simple. So I will here do as well. So we normally say Kira is a document review platform powered by machine learning, and identifies and extracts previously trained key concepts from a document, and therefore speeds up the whole review process, reducing time of doing repetitive extraction work, and has an added workflow management function. And furthermore, we can train new concepts in parallel to a review, which Kira will then shortly extract itself. So that's all we say, quite short and simple.
Nice. Yeah, I think that's exactly on the money. I think in particular as well, what you know, we want to make sure is understood as well, is that you can train Kira in different languages. So you've done that obviously already in German, but not only that, you know, we've also now released a wide range of concept binders that work on German documents. So whether it's, you know, leases to review or commercial contracts or employment documents, you can use Kira's German trained smart fields out of the box to actually find that information, which can obviously help get to value much quicker than having to maybe train your own fields. So yeah, different ways to use the tool, and obviously you've got experience in both of those, which we'll talk about. I think what we want to do next is really look at some of the guiding principles really behind successful adoption, and what kind of helps to set up for successful adoption. And the first, maybe most obvious of those principles, I suppose, is understanding the use case. Sometimes we'll hear from firms that have tech tools just sitting on the shelf, unused, and often I think that's because work hasn't been done, or enough work's not been done to identify the needs of the practice groups or the in-house teams, if it's in-house, and align that with the products available to ensure all the relevant teams internally are on message, essentially. And that often starts maybe with identifying where the low-hanging fruit might be. So with Kira, for example, the value comes in reducing the time to review contracts very straightforwardly. That could be in a traditional DD context, that might be in litigation scenarios or knowledge management rather than, I suppose, transactional. As we're discussing tech adoption in the context of Kira, I thought it would be useful just to very briefly show the platform here. So people on the call are happy to indulge us just to quickly go into the platform in case people aren't aware of what Kira looks like or how it can work. So very briefly, I just want to show you what that essentially involves in terms of reviewing documents in the Kira platform. So you would upload documents, which is very straightforward. You can just drag and drop them into the space here that will upload. And I've got some English contracts, some German leases, some unknown documents there. So the machine learning can help right out of the gate in terms of classifying those documents. And I think particularly in Germany, it can be useful to just understand the languages and the language changes across the document set. So I know here I've got some English documents, some documents in German, and some in other languages. So I can start to maybe assign those to people in my team to have a look at. So I can click into these French documents, for example, and maybe assign those to one of my colleagues to review. Maybe I can give that to Josie to have a look at. So that project management piece is kind of built into the platform, which can be really helpful in terms of just that workflow management, workflow organization. You then want to tell Kira what you're wanting it to look for. So in terms of those smart fields we talked about, that machine learning extraction piece that can help you review faster, you can set up your worksheets in different ways here. So I've got a worksheet for German lease review, and that's got my German pre-trained fields in there. I've got a worksheet for my English contract review. So if I'm looking for English clauses in those documents, I've got a worksheet that helps me with that. And that means that everybody can work collaboratively in the same platform, all simultaneously, essentially, as well. So in terms of what that review would look like, if I go to my tags again, I'm looking at my real estate agreements here. These are all my German documents. I'd assign those to my colleague ahead of time, and I can just click into the first document and start to see what Kira's extracted here. So the document is OCR'd, so it's much easier to interact with and navigate through and find information from. And here on the right, I'm seeing all those extracted pieces of text. So Kira's there as your additional set of eyes, or your first set of eyes, to help you review the documents and get you to where you need to be a lot faster. So I think that's all down to the messaging, as you will probably have seen, Nina, as well, when you've been speaking to lawyers around what the AI is designed to do. It's there to supplement the existing process and not there to replace the lawyer. And sometimes that messaging, I think, is obviously key in terms of getting that sell right internally and getting that confidence, I suppose, in terms of what these tools are there for and what they're designed to help with. And all this information can flow through into a report, into an Excel or a Word doc. So that is essentially the high-level overview of Kira, just to make sure people were understanding what we were talking about really when talking about this machine learning extraction. So if we think back to these adoption principles, then I think it's certainly important to understand the full manual workflow as a starting point. So when you're speaking to fee earners, that's one of the key things. I know, Nina, you obviously come from a real estate background, so understanding the use case would have come very naturally to you. I wonder how you or others in the innovation team have developed that use case knowledge in other practice areas.
Now you can hear me, I hope, again.
Yes.
Absolutely, yes. So as I'm coming from a real estate background, I rather know how an M&A transaction looks like. But in general, every new joiner, doesn't matter if a lawyer or not a lawyer, will get a training where our partners will explain a transaction in detail. So this means even if we have, for example, economists working here in our innovation team, they will then know how a transaction could look like or what's the steps. So starting with a review, negotiation, and then signing, for example. And this helps new lawyers and the non-lawyers to understand the whole procedure in total. Nevertheless, the internal gain knowledge is the key, and of course this takes time. So you need to work on some methods to know what you do and to know what you want to have in the end. And what I experience is regarding fairness, I think it's most important to understand what they really want. And to get there, to get the heart of the issue, you need to ask questions. That's the most simple way to do so. So when we kick off, I normally ask a set of questions, and this is then implemented in our process. So using AI often includes also a project manager, and we often then sit down and discuss with the project manager and his experience and my experience. And then, yeah, we can quickly set up a whole structure, which at least in the beginning always seems to be efficient.
Yeah, I think that's spot on, because sometimes the lawyers won't necessarily always know exactly what they're looking for as well, or what the issues might be. So understanding and speaking about that end-to-end workflow is critical, I think. And there's a skill, isn't there, I think, in asking the right questions and being sometimes brave enough to challenge the lawyers sometimes around what they're looking for, to really uncover those pain points. So, you know, a lawyer might think that they just need help reviewing documents and finding information, but they haven't really expressed or haven't thought about the fact that they don't have an easy way to even identify what documents to be reviewed in the first place, or identify the different languages when scoping the documents. So unpicking that, I think, is a really key part of that use case discovery. And it also requires strong product knowledge, because you need to have that in tandem with the use case understanding to identify whether those pain points can actually be solved by using the tool. I don't know if it springs to mind any kind of examples of, you know, combining that assessment of the use case versus the pain point and that product knowledge to create value from Kira where you wouldn't necessarily think there was out of the box.
Yeah, happy to do so. So we had a matter which we advised 2.5 years ago, and we needed to review over 5,000 land register excerpts to identify if a tenant easement was validly registered in the land register. So in this case, we only wanted to know if yes or no. And we decided using Kira for 2 simple reasons. One is we would like to have an overview of who's doing what, so we saw it in a demo, and in which excerpt an easement is registered. And besides, the easements are very easy to find in an excerpt. We trained and reviewed at the same time Kira. In Kira, and additionally, we were super quick. But yes, one of the pain points is the structure of a German excerpt. So most of the listener, I think, will know how a German excerpt look like, and it can be really confusing. So we didn't know that, and but we tried it. That's a try and error process. So it might take us a bit longer than train normal documents in Kira, because we wanted Kira only to extract not underlined text and then including an easement. So it's not that easy. But however, it worked out, and Kira was able to identify most of the passages. And one of the main advantages was also in the end of the review, because we reported an Excel result. And this exported Excel spreadsheet was then linked with another Excel spreadsheet where we had the contract numbers in it. So we could link the land register excerpt with the corresponding contract, and we could give the client a really nice experience, and he had all in one. So yeah, so it's possible.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good example, but one that comes down to knowing the product really well, and as we said, understanding that use case and the pain points that would happen if you're reviewing that document or that document set manually. I think as well, it sounds like, you know, that was used on that one project, and so even training up on that same project, you were still able to get value, even if you're going to train on the same process as you're then reviewing further down the line. So you can still see those gains happening kind of in that live training process as well. I think the last piece on here as well, in terms of this use case understanding, and maybe even the most important, is winning the hearts and minds of decision makers to make sure that they understand the use case as well. So thinking about, you know, the people who are going to actually sanction the use of the tool on a live deal or a live matter, often a partner, maybe a senior person in the practice group. Sometimes that's easy to do. I think, you know, sometimes they would see the value immediately, and it's just a question of, you know, working out the best way to implement. But we've also seen firms where there's some resistance and more education needed. I wonder, Nina, what your experience is in terms of that ability to just win people over, essentially.
Yeah, so my experience shows that not everybody is engaged immediately. I mean, okay, that's normal. But I think that might also because AI in our daily lives is sometimes a little bit suspicious. So that might also reflect it in the business life. However, the reviews often done by junior lawyers means they're more open-minded to use new approaches. They can more easy change their way of working, and once they do so, it's often they're really happy after do so, and it's a word of mouth recommendation then. So I would also like to point out that it's always a combination of the lawyer and the machine. We pointed it out a little bit earlier already a bit. So we always need law experts for training new legal concepts as well for the legal evaluation of a critical clause. So yeah, the law nature is complex, and so we will always need lawyers to look explicitly at these critical things. And so no lawyer will ever lose his job. And if a lawyer can do something to be more progressive in this regard and to make him irreplaceable, then he needs to become tech savvy and to become more valuable for the firm. And let me shortly give you an example from my experience. So I had more like a laggard partner, and we did a review for him, and we already reviewed documents for 1 year. So we reviewed about 1,000 documents already, and we had another 9,000 to come. And I was part of this review team once I worked in real estate. And then I switched my roles, and I thought, why did we not using Kira for this work? Because what you did is reviewing the document, and on the other one hand side, you wrote down something in the Excel you found in the document. So the partner was not really happy when I came to him and asked for using Kira, but he said, look, we're gonna try and show the client, and we will see what the client would say. So I prepared a demo, and we did a meeting, and the client was, wow, that's an amazing solution for our problem, what we have. And he told me, let's try with the 100 documents. So we tried with 100 documents, and the partner was super happy. He was convinced because it's so easy to use. The client was super happy. The reviewers were happy. And in the end, we had an amazing report. So this partner is now a big champion of using Kira. And so you see how the opinion of using technology can quickly change.
Yes, well, I mean that's a perfect example, I suppose, but one that's nicely accelerated with that client emphasis as well. So that's often what can give a bit of a push, I suppose, to a partner to get things over the line or to change the way they're working, and that's great. I guess in terms of something that goes hand in hand with that use case understanding is establishing a clear process or a clear new process when using a tech tool or using an AI tool. Once the use case is fully understood, the impact can really happen when you get proper process in place. So, is Kira considered in pitches, for example, at the outset, or if no pitches are needed, is it thought about at the early enough stage of a matter to make sure that you're actually using the product on the matters and the projects that are suitable for it, and not missing any opportunities as well? I wonder, Neil, at the outset within Linklaters, if you do need to pitch for a new business, who makes the decision on whether Kira or even just tech generally should be included in that pitch deck?
Yeah, I mean, we are big global firms, so sometimes there is a lack of information. That's normal. But what does it mean? Because if a partner or a BD assistant in our firm who's supporting creating a pitch documentation, and they do not know about the tech tools we have or the portfolio we have, and the client didn't ask for it, tech might not be offered. Yeah, this means we missed the opportunity for inclusion. But we started to look at this process, and we improved the way. So we trained, for example, the BD team briefly in use cases. We spoke with them about precedent matters and what can be done. So most of them now know which questions they need to ask to the partner to better establish any feasibility of using tech and AI tools. Or even if they do not know, they know now who to contact. So in this regard, they would contact me or any member of my team. So we started changing the processes so that everybody is aware of the tools and the solutions we have.
Yeah, I think that's really important, isn't it? It's trying to make sure that there are no no gaps essentially in that information flow from between partners or the BD team or obviously you guys in the innovation team, and people in different firms will have different titles perhaps, and there's no set way that you have to structure the law firm necessarily, but I think you still need to make sure that there are no gaps in that information flow essentially from understanding the use case to then what that process looks like when trying to actually implement the tool or even propose that it's implemented in a pitch process. Obviously, you might not need a pitch process. You might get an instruction that just comes in from an existing client. And again, I suppose it's about trying to make sure that you are identifying the opportunity before it's too late, or you've already got an established process in place, which I think when we've spoken before, you said that in real estate, it's almost part of the course essentially that you've got Kira being used on projects. So how did that happen? How did that come to be?
Yeah, as you said, so in our real estate team, this process has already been established. It's also based on a big partner support, I have to admit. So we started already 5 years ago to use Kira for every single transaction. And yeah, we trained the system just by doing our normal work. So now the process looks the following. When a matter kicks off, I'm normally already aware of it, or if not, the leading lawyer will call me. And then normally a junior lawyer will just quickly prepare the documents from the VDR. So he's looking if the documents are complete, about a structure. And once this initial check is done, my team uploads the documents to Kira. And the using over the time has enabled greater consistency in the reviewing system. So it means we do not need to train the people anymore. So, we upload the documents, add them to the project, and then they get an automated email and they can start work right away. So the answer is yes, it's definitely possible.
But I think, as you mentioned, that was made more possible by there being a very close communication between the partner and the innovation team, who, at that time, the innovation team very closely linked to the real estate group, and so there was nice trust there, I suppose, between the two streams. With, for example, the M&A side, have you found it's been more challenging, or what's the process been there in terms of getting a set standardized process in place?
Yeah, as you mentioned, so our real estate team has a well-established process because of this partner buy-in and a good trust. But in contrast with the M&A transactions, it's for the time being, it's more part of the win of a partner. So depending on who's the partner, the partner might already know about my team, and then they normally call when they have a request for a project where they might think Kira could be a fit. So it's completely based on the partner's know-how or at the BD team's know-how, which we mentioned just a minute ago. So, but also sometimes they saw maybe one of our trainings or something in our calls. So it's our visibility is then more about what we do in the firm and how visible we are. So that's one part. The other part is that we also track the new opening matters. So what we do is then when we see a matter which could be a fit, we might also call the partners and tell them, did you think of Kira? Do you think it's a fit? So you see there are two approaches. The one is the personal relationship we already have with the partner, or if not, we also track the matters which are opening. So sometimes we also have to go there and ask them and offer our help. And we're still working on this internal process, but as you can imagine, we are a big firm, a global firm, so it sometimes takes a bit longer than you would like to do so. But so there are two approaches more or less.
Yeah, and that makes sense. Look, it's hard to get that standardized process in place, across the board. Sometimes it does need to be more of an ad hoc approach. And I think in particular, as you say there, if you can take the initiative from either the BD side or from the innovation side to proactively go and suggest projects that could be suitable, I think that's a really good idea. And I think we've seen that work on lots of firms within Europe in particular. I think just to have that kind of hands-on approach, I think ultimately, the more you can take the decision-making process away from the individual lawyer a lot of the time, the better, just because, it's natural to want to just do things the way that you have always done them. And so sometimes you need that extra person or extra opinion to kind of give a different way of proposing to do things. And obviously, the more success you build internally, the more that will be easier to roll out. I think as well, as part of this, we've kind of touched on a little bit, it's important to try and pin down some clear roles within the firm in terms of that new process. So, is there clarity around, how and when innovation will be involved, for example? Will a certain person set up projects on behalf of a deal team? Are they brought in at an early stage to plan project management? Ultimately, just trying to make sure that you're reducing the number of clicks the lawyer has to make before they start the review, I suppose, and just making it as easy as possible to transition to that new way of working. I think it's also sort of in tandem with that important to get the training of the lawyers right. So we've talked a little bit about the training of the innovation team and making sure they understand the use cases, but also you want to make sure you're training lawyers at the right time. I wonder, from your perspective, Nina, do you think it's feasible to train lawyers just as they're about to start a live matter? Do you think that is that doable, or do you think it's too late by then?
No, as you said, the barrier to use is often the training, because it's often seen as too time consuming, but actually I think that's the wrong mindset. So when training is done, for example, to a wider team, it's almost forgotten by the time the deal life comes in then. But I think the much better approach is to allow for in-deal training, as we did for these land register excerpts as an example. So we started reviewing the documents and the system was trained at the same time. And even with this, you will still save time in the review and have the another advantages of training the whole system. So I think, yeah, I would rather go for the in-deal training, and this doesn't cost you any time.
No, I think that's right. I think there's sometimes a perception that you need to just get everybody trained up on a tool sort of en masse. But often, that's useful as a starting point, but you definitely need that kind of more focused kind of training just before a deal starts, I think, to make sure people are confident and haven't forgotten the training that's gone on before. I think it's also, as a kind of final point on this piece, is it's really critical to have a plan around the reporting process, or the reporting aspect of the workflow. So not just the review phase, but what's going to happen with that information that's been reviewed, certainly in the Kira context at least anyway. This is, I think, one of the big questions that I will always ask fee owners when I'm working with them on how to set up for success. And I think just being clear in your own minds around what that process should look like, and then communicating that to the fee owners is obviously really critical as well. I think, Nina, you mentioned to me before that you've thought creatively about using Kira's Q&A field, for example, to create streamlined, consistent output to help with reporting within Kira as well, and that's a really creative and really good idea, I think, about how to do that.
Yeah, that's one of our ideas we had to streamline the process. So we save time to not write any summaries anymore. We do not need any person who combines different reports anymore. And this is super easy because also the lawyers, can just answer with one click and do not need to write a special summary anymore. So, and the real estate team, as I already mentioned, is already aware of using Kira. They are really into this tool, and the combination of saving time because Kira is extracting most of the concepts already in the documents, at the same time saving time because you do not have to type in summaries anymore, and then you get an extract of all the important stuff. Saves a lot of time.
Yeah, no, completely. So look, we've looked at understanding the use case and putting in place some good process where possible. I think sometimes one of the frustrating aspects to adoption can be that when you've got those two principles kind of nailed down fairly well, you still might not be able to implement because of a potentially preventable issue. So certain blockers, maybe business type level blockers, that could always be navigated with a bit of forethought or a bit of consideration ahead of time. One of those issues I think we sometimes come across is the lack of client consent, maybe, to use the tool or use a kind of cloud-based process sometimes. I know, Nina, you're on premise with Kira currently at Linklaters, although I think maybe about to move to the cloud. Is this client consent issue something you've seen much, or that you anticipate coming up against as you move to the cloud?
Yeah, of course, some clients and as well some colleagues are skeptical. But to address this issue, we have taken some steps to change, for example, our engagement terms wording. So this allows us now that tools which are on-prem or cloud are covered at this outset. And at the same time, some processes are so embedded already that the use of tech isn't mentioned explicitly anymore to the client. It's like you imagine using Word or PowerPoint, so you never would mention this to a client anymore. And coming back to the cloud topic, so from a GDPR perspective, the only really important thing from our European point of view is that the cloud needs to be hosted in Europe. And yeah, that's it more or less.
Yeah, because I think, as you say, on the security point there, that traditionally, I think we've experienced German firms would look to host on-prem if they can. So do you think there's maybe a shift, maybe it starts to come away from that and start to embrace the cloud more?
Yeah, absolutely, because more and more tech products coming out and most of them are cloud-based. So it's becoming, yeah, different to manage all this different system if one of them are hosted on-prem, the other ones in a cloud. So this also becomes not cost effective. And that's why we're also moving to the cloud to, you know, have all systems based in the cloud. And of course, it's a cheaper option from a firm perspective.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, isn't it? And that also kind of brings us to that pricing item there, which is, as we know, I think one of the common barriers to good adoption, I think. And when we talk about pricing here, we're thinking about, you know, whether firms decide to charge the cost of Kira back to the client, and if so, how do they do that? So from our perspective, I think on the vendor side, whatever, or from an adoption perspective, you know, whatever the decision, it's important that that's well communicated, it's understood by the fee earners in particular, and that it doesn't put fee earners off actually using the tool. How do you think that's evolved internally, and, you know, is there a good sense around how that pricing approach works?
Yeah, so of course our pricing depended on being on-prem until now, but however we more or less have also different types of pricing models. So for an example, we have a classical charge per document, which means it's a disbursement technology cost. We also offer a per doc fee, including the review of a lawyer. So it's more like a mixed price for one document. And then we have, of course, also the cap model. So means we have a cap on fees, and we have a scope of a base number of documents. So that's also possible.
So in every scenario, there'd be some charging back essentially. So there isn't yet that approach to absorbing the cost completely, for instance.
Yeah, not something we're considering at the moment, because currently all tools are charged back to a practice group by now. So of course, in future, it would be amazing if we could reduce all costs, but we are not there yet. And this also belongs to, for example, internal projects where we build up some knowledge management databases. Also, these costs are right now charged back to a practice group.
Interesting, yeah. So I think what we've seen, at least, there's been different approaches from firms in Europe in particular around that pricing point. And to the extent that you're able, I think, sometimes to get it into that mindset of just seeing it as a business cost, seeing those, you know, those tools as business cost where possible, and absorbing that cost, that can sometimes give fee earners that extra freedom to experiment, or that license to just use the tools that they already have. But certainly it's not critical. You know, I think with you know, properly communicated approaches to pricing, you can still see some good success, definitely on the adoption side. We've also got a couple of items here around redaction and download rights. Maybe less common issues, but I think worth touching on. You know, so with document redaction, where would that crop up, do you think, in terms of a scenario for you guys?
Yeah, redactions are really common when it comes to M&A transactions. So it's coming often into mind when we have a sell-side process. And what we need to do there is prepare the VDR documents. So normally we're preparing all the data room documents appropriately and redact certain, for example, personal data. Until now, our team reviewed the documents, and then depending on the information they found, they redacted the document. So we thought, if the documents are already checked before this redaction process, e.g. for creating a legal fact book, why not marking these documents where they saw some kind of personal data in Kira already? So we also implemented a yes/no field, and the yes/no field asks the question if a redaction is required. And the simplest thing the reviewer had to do is click on a yes or no if they saw some personal data. So for all yes answered documents, we then build a macro which links the corresponding documents to the redaction system where the document is also uploaded. And then the editor can immediately start redacting without checking every single document in the data room beforehand. So yeah, we try to find a workaround for this topic, and that's how we do it right now.
That's interesting. So it's more. So I think you said there it's sell side when you're kind of setting up the data room. Would you ever encounter it on the buy side that you've seen? So you're getting documents
Not right now.
already uploaded without being redacted ahead of time.
Exactly. So more for the sell side.
Yeah, and with then looking at the download right point here, we've heard anecdotally from some firms that this could sometimes be a roadblock. I think when you're actually reviewing documents in Kira or wanting to review documents in Kira and not having that ability to access those documents to pull them into the platform in the first place. Nina, is this something you've ever experienced on your side, or is it just something we've heard kind of hearsay about, do you think?
Oh yeah, the download thing is not a big deal anymore because I think more or less every transaction is now handled online. So we didn't come across a lot of downloading problems or issues. We sometimes have some password secured documents, but that's really rare. So I think that's also improving with the time so that the documents are readable, all managed online as well. So I think not many of our clients have, physical folders anymore. They more or less have, everybody of them has a contract management system and all documents are stored online.
Yeah, that's probably true, isn't it? I think it's maybe a corollary of that pandemic impact and working from home, just easy access to documents is just ubiquitous now, perhaps. So it'd be good if that becomes less and less of an issue. The last sort of guiding principle we wanted to talk about here was around that communication of success or communicating the value internally. It's naturally going to be critical to sparking confidence and building up understanding within different practice groups or within certain personas who maybe are less immediately convinced of the value and need that internal guidance and an idea generation to really help them kind of get on board, I suppose. What, Nina, have you guys done at Linklaters, do you say, to try and help with that process?
Yeah, we of course also encourage people by either short videos which we produce, we attending lunch prayers, and we also present case studies on a various of, for example, training sessions, stuff like this. But however, I would think the personal relationship you have to a practice group and the mouse-to-mouse spread are the main drivers. So I would recommend to build a personal relationship, a strong personal relationship, and then I think the thing is, running by itself.
Yeah, I think that's really critical. And I think, as you say, you mentioned there, doing some videos. I think we've seen, some firms put on little mini road shows across their offices to speak to their tech successes and to build, Q&As, even doing a little, mini demo to the practice group, recapping what was done and looking at lessons learned. And I think trying to get some partner and senior engagement around the comms piece as well is really, really impactful from what we've seen as well. So, getting that creation from top down, that kind of knowledge creation from top down as well as bottom up, I suppose. I think also kind of hand in hand with that is evidencing ROI. Sometimes can be quite difficult, particularly when you're starting out on the pathway of your kind of AI adoption journey. Sometimes you don't see those big ROI gains in the first couple of years. And so I think it's about just understanding as a business that there's a long-term approach here. Obviously, we do want to get some quick wins and some good success stories, but it's not detrimental if you don't to begin with. I think it's all about trying to build that pathway to long-term behavioral change, as we touched on at the outset. That's what we're striving for here, and that can sometimes take time. And so sometimes tying the use of the tool to kind of hard ROI analysis, I think, is difficult to justify in some cases. So I think trying to have that long-term view is always really important. And generally speaking, I think that mindset of not letting the perfect be the enemy of the good, I think it's a well-trodden phrase, but one that I think is incredibly relevant. You know, a lot of that comes down to the communication and the messaging internally, particularly with the lawyers who might expect, you know, 100% accuracy from AI, for example, when that's not necessarily what it's designed to do. So just understanding that getting further along the adoption process and the AI journey is what's important here, and making these incremental gains to ultimately make a long change in the long term, or a significant change in the long term, I should say. So just as a final couple of thoughts here then, I wonder if there's a sense around what Linklaters plans might be or goals might be for the next couple of years in terms of the tech adoption journey. We've talked a lot about what's happened so far, and I think the good progress you've made, but is there anything that's kind of top of mind for where you want to be going with this AI process?
Absolutely. So I already spoke a little bit about it, but want to touch it again. So what we want is to implement Kira as you would use Word or Excel or PowerPoint or any of these tools. So they are common used when it comes to the business life, and we would like, of course, also implement the tech tools as Word or PowerPoint. So using tech should just be normalized and not the exception anymore, because right now it's not an exception anymore, but it's also not normal. So we're somewhere between, and of course that would be cool if we would be on the same page to be normal as Word or Excel. And what else? We would love to if the tools would work more closely together. So in the last years we had a patchwork quilt from some smaller suppliers, and now we see a buying frenzy of the bigger players and buying up the smaller companies, as we saw with Kira as well. So and that's something we would love Litera would do now, is to combine the tools, let them speak, and just extend the use cases and combine all of them so that we can offer, in the best case, one Litera tool and we have everything in this tool. So yeah, that would be my comment of what I would like to have in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I think that sounds spot on in terms of where we at Litera also would like the vision to be. Really, it's creating that ecosystem of products, but that can hopefully all integrate and speak to each other in a very intuitive way. We're not yet there, not there yet, but that's certainly I think where the plans are going forward. And then I wonder, just before we finish up or before we go to any Q&A, would you have any advice, Nina, do you think, for anyone that's maybe partway through their journey or starting out on their AI adoption journey, and how to kind of continue to fight the fight?
Yeah, absolutely happy to do so. I think I have 3 points. So the first one is, don't be afraid of any try and error scenarios. So you train a new AI system, there could be some errors in this process, so that's fine. I think the second one is be resistant. Do not accept a no or even no answer, just email again, give a call. I think that's also really important to stay motivated then. And I think the last one, it's never too late starting learning the technology. As we saw, Rita said, we are already quite good. We use it as a standard process, but we also train Kira for not new methods. So it's not a problem at all to start using Kira from now on. So I think that's top 3 advice I would like to give.
Great tips, perfect tips, I think there. So just lastly, I think I just wanted to check if we had any questions come in. Just one here that I've seen actually, which is just what are the biggest challenges that you've found, or kind of the biggest challenge you're facing at the moment in terms of moving that adoption journey forward?
So I think my biggest challenge is really to get the partners buy-in. I think it's not a big challenge to get the clients buy-in. I think it's more depending on our side, because of course our people here have standard processes, and this processes has been established as well. So you need to change these approaches. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges, because the algorithm and the system, it's not a challenge, because it's yeah, it's so good. So it nearly learns everything. But the challenge are we human beings. So the challenge is break routes, break established processes, think new ways, and change our way of working.
Yeah, and I think that will hopefully come with time and with obviously more and more people in the firm championing these tools and understanding the tools better as well, and creating that pathway for learning, which I think you're already doing. So yeah, I think as you mentioned, it will take time, but I think you're certainly getting there. And then just one last thing actually from me, I just wonder whether have you since the pandemic, have you found it easier to have these conversations with people, because obviously there's already been a behavioural change needed in the way they're working, or is it harder because people are working from home, there's less, you're not able to develop those relationships as closely perhaps as if you're just in the same office?
I think it's getting easier because also the client, request using technology. So in a one way you're forced to do so. And I think the other point, I'm responsible, for example, for the whole European offices. So yeah, we're getting used to work online, and so I think that's not a big deal anymore. It's more really to change their behavior, to change their standard processes of doing their work. So yeah, I think it's easier, and I'm really yeah, or it's a good point that the pandemic, gave this push into the right direction, and it speeds up the whole trend a little bit.
Yeah,
The
and
one
then
good
also
thing about the pandemic.
yeah, exactly. And as you mentioned, the client pushing things is obviously going to be a big game changer. I think we're certainly seeing in the UK a big shift where a couple of years ago, you could go to a pitch as a firm and say we're using one of these tech tools, and that almost would be enough to differentiate yourself. Whereas now, it's the clients are saying, well, of course you are, everyone is. What are you going to do in the way that you use that tool to differentiate yourselves? So firms are having to think much more strategically and deliberately about what they're going to use the tools for and how they're going to use it. And that I think is helping to drive change at a much faster pace as well. So hopefully that will also be the case, and it's starting to be the case in Germany. So hopefully we'll have another one of these conversations, the next couple of years, and we'll see even better progress than we've already seen. So Nina, thank you so much for joining me today. Thanks everybody on the call who've also listened in, and for the people who typed in that question. Hope you have a great rest of the week, and thanks very much for joining.
Thank you, guys. Bye.